Scoring points on your serve is arguably the most important skill for winning more games in pickleball. However, if you're struggling to get from the baseline to the kitchen after your serve, or you're finding yourself constantly on defense, you're likely missing out on scoring streaks and losing more games than necessary. The good news is there's 6 common mistakes that are causing this issue, and they're super easy to fix, and they'll make a massive difference in your game. So the first mistake that I see a lot of players make is that they get trapped in the back of the court, and they can't effectively make it in without missing or losing control of the point. So the way that you need to move forward is with what I call the traffic light system, which you might have heard of, but there's a huge mistake within the traffic light system that a lot of players make that prevents them from using it properly. So all the traffic light system is when your opponents are hitting the ball, right? So when your opponents are at the kitchen after they return and you're hitting your third shot to them when they're up here, if they're hitting the ball low, so if they're hitting the ball below the height of their knee, that is what we call a green light. So if I'm hitting from the back of the court and they're hitting it at that height, that's my cue to move straight in to the kitchen. The next part of the traffic light system is a yellow light. So if my opponents are hitting mid-height balls, so if they're about right here, let me see what that looks like, guys. So if my opponents are hitting mid-height balls, that is my cue to move forward to the transition zone where I should try to hit a reset. So I'm gonna move in, go for a reset, try to hit a reset like I did there, and then move up to the kitchen. The red light is if they have a high ball. So if I hit my opponents a high ball like that, I should stay back and try to hit a drop on the next shot like I just did there. So the thing that a lot of players get wrong with the traffic light system is they wait to see where the ball is going to land on their opponent. So you're obviously judging where the ball is going to be in terms of the height that they're hitting it, but what you have to do is you have to figure out where it's going to be right when you hit it. So if I hit a ball and I see, oh, that's going low, I'm gonna move in. I already took too much time to where now it's too late for me to get in. So what I need to do is the second I hit the shot, I need to decide, all right, that's gonna be low, and move in right when I hit it. So you have to use the feel of where you think the ball is gonna go. You can't wait to see. So that's the big mistake that's gonna make it feel like you can't get in quickly enough. So to show you an example of what that looks like, Kennedy's gonna give me a hard feed. We're gonna play a little point here. I know that one's gonna be low, but not too low. So I move into the transition zone. So that one bounced up a little bit. So she's hitting it in the yellow zone. So I know when that ball is in the air, this is where I need to be. And before she hits that shot, I'm already here. So that's key. You need to be there before they hit the ball. And the key is as you're moving forward, if you hit it in the green zone or the yellow zone, when you're moving in, you want to jump into your split stance right as your opponent is hitting the ball so that you can react in either direction. So if I hit in the yellow zone to jack and I'm moving forward, I want to jump into my split stance in the transition zone, and then I do it again once I get to the kitchen off of my reset. So to show you a demo of this with Kennedy, she's going to try to come in off of my feet using the traffic light system we just talked about. So that's yellow zone. She's going to pause in the transition zone area. She's able to make it in because she has enough time to react. So you see there, it's because she only went halfway in. I had a pretty hard roll volley, but she's still able to get it back. Let's do it again. Another yellow zone, right at her feet. That was a little tough, but you see she splits, which is why she's able to move in effectively. If she was just running straight in, it would be too hard for her to react, and if she's staying back, it's gonna be challenging for her to hit another good drop. Now then we're gonna get an example from Kennedy's perspective so we can see what she's thinking in real time.
All right, so we got a yellowish green there. I'm in my split stance for the reset. Feels pretty good on our drops here.
So yeah, the goal of that, guys, is to get in so that you can get into that dinking rally. So Kennedy successfully made it in. I couldn't be aggressive. So we got into the dinking rally where the strategy changes. Even if you understand the traffic light system and you know how to execute it fully though, you might be getting stuck in the back of the court because you don't have a good strategy on your serve and your third shot. So this next mistake goes over exactly how to fix that. So the second mistake is walking up to serve with absolutely zero strategy. So if you're doing this, what's gonna happen is it's gonna feel like when you're playing points, you're just fully at the will of how well you're playing that day and what your opponents are doing. So if you feel like you go on big streaks when you're on good days and on bad days you can't seem to score at all, you're probably walking up without a plan or without a plan that's very good. The solution to this is to always walk up to the line with a vague plan of what's going to happen. And the two ways to do this are with coordinated plays. So an example of this would be I'm serving down the middle and I'm gonna go for an aggressive drop out wide. So that would look like this. Down the middle serve, and I go for an aggressive drop out wide to get my opponent on the run. The other way that you can start a point is with what I like to call improv. So if you're playing really high level players, it might not be super easy to do a coordinated play all the time. So you can start with improv, where you're responding to their shots and you have a framework to follow that lets you follow a plan throughout the point based on what they do. So that looks like, all right, Jack hit a middle return, I'm gonna drop, I'm gonna come in with a traffic-like system, and I'm going to try to take over from the kitchen. So you always wanna start off the point with one of those two frameworks in mind, whether it be plays or improv. The next two mistakes, though, have to do with what players get wrong within these two styles of strategy. Guys, as a quick side note, the reason why pros like James Ignatowicz and Thomas Wilson use their dink masters religiously is because they know the true value of repetition. Remember, while studying the game like you are now is super important, nothing will ever beat practice. With a dink master, you can practice at home without having to go to the courts. And if you use code SERVING, you can get $15 off your order. So when it comes to using plays, the mistake that players make is they don't have a plan as to when they should use them and who they should use them against. So not every play is gonna work against every player. So the third mistake is in regards to our plays. And what it is that most players don't know when to pull out plays and who to pull out certain plays against. So if this sounds like you, what will happen is when you're running plays like the shake and bake, it'll feel like they just work at random, and there's not really a coordinated way to decide when to use them. So it might just feel like they're not worth it. But this is definitely not the case. You're seeing pros at all levels use these plays and use them successfully. So to make sure you understand what we're talking about with plays, Kennedy, what do you think some of the most common plays are?
The shake and bake is a risky one, but it's a pretty good one. You'll hit an aggressive serve, the next player will drive, and the next person goes for the poach.
Exactly, so that's a good one. What else?
Another good one is the drive-drop combo. So you'll hit a good serve, you're gonna rip that ball, which is gonna make me hit a softer shot, and it'll make it easier for you to drop the next ball. Another good one is where you serve to one spot, pulling them out wide, and then doing an aggressive drop the other way to get them off the court. Other than these, there's a bunch of different plays and variations you guys can use when you're playing your games, so make sure to comment your favorite down below.
So all these plays can work against certain types of players, but you have to test them out in order to figure out what's going to work. And you can make assumptions about your opponents beforehand to determine what you think might work against them. So if I try the play where I try to get my opponent more towards the center, then I go for an aggressive drop out wide, and I see that my opponent's not moving very quickly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep using that play because I know it's kind of working and it's not a very risky thing to try, right? I can also make this assumption beforehand that maybe my opponent's movement doesn't look very good, so running a play like that will be effective. On the other hand, if I'm doing it and he's responding super well, I probably don't want to use that play because I'm inheriting additional risk by not serving down the center and by going for a drop more out to the side. So against a player that's doing well against that play, I'm not going to use it. So with every play, you need to kind of make an assumption based on what your opponent's skills are if it will work, and use it more often if it does. And you obviously want to test if it works, and if it does, you'll use it more. So another example of that would be the shake and bake. If I think my opponents aren't good at responding to drives, then what we can do is go for them, and my partner can move in and crash like he did there. However, if they're really good at responding to drives and they're keeping everything super low, we probably don't want to use that play very often. So whether or not you use these plays has to do with the assumptions you make beforehand and whether or not they're actually working. Regardless of how well your plays are working though, at a higher level, you're gonna need to be using improv around 75% of the time. So our fourth mistake is that when players are doing an improv strategy, they don't have a strict formula they're following. If you don't have a strict formula, you might feel like you're lost in matches and you don't feel like you know how to adjust point by point if things aren't going your way. This is how that might look. So there, Jack hit a deep return. I went for a drive, which as I'm gonna show you, is not the best response to that sort of shot. So when we're thinking about our formula, it's really just how we're thinking about how to hit our third shot and our fifth shot based off what our opponents are doing. So looking at our third, generally if our opponents are giving us shorter, higher returns, it's smarter for us to go for drives, right? So this isn't the case every time, but that's generally the best time to go for a drive is on a shorter, higher return where you're closer to your opponent. In a more neutral or defensive position on a return, I'm probably better off going for a drop because this is a safer bet for me to move forward. So your improv isn't actually improv, it's just a formula that you follow based on the shots that you're receiving throughout the point. So the rule of thumb is if it's higher and shorter, you're gonna be more aggressive. If it's deeper and harder, or maybe it's at your feet, you're probably gonna go for a shot in the kitchen, whether it be a drop or a reset.
But you don't have to follow this formula to a T. Based on how your opponents are playing and what they're good at, you guys can make adjustments.
So what she's saying is, depending on what you're doing, let's say I'm going for drives on short shots, and my opponents are responding really well, and we can't seem to get any success with that, we might adjust to being more focused on using drops, even if the ball is shorter. So you're responding to what your opponents are doing, but you have this general improv framework in mind. On the other hand, if you're using your drives on these shots and they just keep working over and over again, you might actually want to use them in situations where maybe you wouldn't against certain players. So if it's working, I might actually go for my drives on a little bit deeper shots too, because it's actually paying off. And this formula really applies to any shot as you're moving forward on your serve. So it's not just the third shot. There's a formula that you generally want to follow, and there's best practices, but depending on what you're seeing, you might want to be more aggressive, or you might want to be a little more passive so that you can get to the kitchen and work the point. But none of the last few mistakes will even matter though if you're making our fifth mistake, which is that you're not getting in position good enough to hit the ball. And most players really underestimate what getting into good position looks like. So if you watch me in this point, you'll see I might be getting to the ball where I need to be, but because I'm lazy with my footwork, I'm slightly off. So you want to do whatever you can after your serve so that you're hitting your third shot in the perfect spot every time. So the perfect spot is out in front of your body to the side. So on a backhand, same thing. You want to do whatever you can with your feet so that it's perfect. Like a little bit off is not okay. You need it to be, you want to have good posture in this position. You don't want to be leaning, you don't want to be falling over. So what that looks like with my feet, I hit my serve, I immediately get into that position, and the same thing applies to my resets too. So the better my position can be, the higher chance that I hit a good third. So if you want to optimize that, optimize the chance that you score, you want to focus on your footwork because that's the only thing you have control over before you hit your third. So as a reminder, we don't want to be lazy. That is lazy footwork, and it might be normal for you right now, but to get to the highest level, we need to be taking these little adjustment steps before a third, which look like this. Even if the ball is coming right to me, I'm taking adjustments, and then as I'm moving forward, I'm jumping into my split stance, as I mentioned earlier, so that I can sort of lean to get my resets. So in combination, that looks like this. I'm moving my feet to get ready for my third. I'm moving in. I'm gonna split so I can do a reset, split. Now I'm in, and I'm doing my dinking footwork, which is a little bit different, but you need to be hyper-focused on that footwork, or else you're not gonna be able to put together a strategy because it's gonna feel like you're always off balance. So getting in the right position comes from thinking about this as soon as you see the ball. So the second I see where the ball is going, I'm moving my feet in that direction, and I'm doing it with the proper technique. And I know I missed my shots in most of those examples, but you get the point. And guys, thank you so much for supporting our channel. We're living our dream out here. We're able to do this full time. So if you love our channel and you like our content, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It really helps us grow, and it helps us grow the sport. But now we're moving on to our sixth and probably most common mistake, which is that you're not moving in tandem with your partner. So a common rule of thumb, and you've probably heard people say this, is that as you're moving into the court or you're moving side to side, you generally want to keep a close enough distance to your partner. So you never really want to get more than a half court's distance away. So we're leaving a big gap when we're doing this. And there's a bunch of different reasons for this. So the first is, as I'm moving forward using the traffic light system, I'm following that for my partner too. So if my partner hits a drop and it's a green light drop, we should both be getting in together, right? If I stay back, it sort of defeats the purpose of moving in. They can just hit to me while I'm back. The same thing goes for a yellow light drop. If my partner hits a yellow light drop, we both need to get to the transition zone so we can defend with our resets. If we didn't do that, even if my partner hits a good drop, I'm back and I might miss my next shot and I'm just back here for no reason. So I need to make sure we're moving forward in tandem, right? Maybe the one exception to this is the shake and bake, but that's not necessarily something you want to do very often. The other reason that you need to be thinking about being close to your partner is because if one person gets pulled off the court, there's a big gap in the middle that the other player needs to cover. So this is called shading. When you're at the back and you're trying to move forward, if one player gets pulled off the court, the other player needs to shift towards the middle to cover that. So you should always be thinking about that and keeping an eye on where your partner is so that you can make sure you're covering the best possible portions of the court. And make sure to send this to your partner if you don't think that they know that. And guys, if you're looking for a cool place to get a bunch of resources for your pickleball game, whether it be coaching, courts, classes, all that good stuff, go check out playpickleball.com. But as I just mentioned, the one exception to this moving in tandem thing is the shake and bake. And a few weeks ago, we made a full video on how to use that. So go check it out if you're interested.